Hello everyone, my name is Elijah Proctor, and today we're going to be talking about data visualization and charts. So we're going to be using three Python libraries, Matplotlib, Seaborn, and Plotly, to apply principles of chart design and data visualization. And so first what we need to do is we need to locate a data set. And so what we're using is this Titanic data set, which comes from Kaggle.com. And so this page kind of gives you a description of what data is presented here and how it's like a combination of two different data sets combined to create this data set. My first script kind of just creates, basically just reads from the data set and displays the first 15 results so we can get a gauge of what types of variables are in here. So we have our passenger ID, we have whether or not the passenger survived, their passenger class, first, second, or third, the name of the passenger, their gender, their age, how many siblings and spouses were on board, how many parents and children were on board, the ticket number, how much they paid for the ticket, the cabin that they're in, and also their embarkation. So if it would either be Q, S, or C. And so if we look up at the top, we can see that Q stands for Queenstown, C stands for Sherborne, and S stands for Southampton. And so here we have a bunch of code that basically generates these plots to answer our second question, create at least two different visualizations for each variable, and include at least a bar chart, line chart, scatter plot, and histogram. And we basically create a bunch of subplots to kind of join everything together. That's kind of how I organized all this data. And so we're just going to go skip to the graphs because this is a lot of code. And I wrote little insights of what data could be gathered for each plot that we created. Here, our first plot, our count plot, which basically shows the survival by class, which shows that those who were in the lower or the higher passenger class were more likely to die than those who were in first or second class. We have our age distribution histogram, which basically shows that the people who are on this, the passengers on this boat, were more likely in the 20 to 40 age range. We have our embarkation count plot, or not box plot, our bar chart, which basically shows that most people who were passengers were from Southampton. We have our fare versus age scatter plot, which shows the ticket prices versus how old they were and whether or not they survived or died. And it kind of shows that those who were poorer were more likely to die than those who basically those who had more money and those who paid more for their tickets, which is pretty sad. Then we have our survival by gender bar chart, which shows that those who were male were more likely to die than those who were female, as there are many males that died in comparison to the females that did survive. Then we have our fair distribution histogram, which shows that most people paid for cheaper tickets on this boat. Then we have our survival by age line chart, which basically shows that there is not really a correlation between survival and age, except for when you get to the younger people. If you were younger, you are more likely to survive. And then we have our siblings and spouses versus children and parents, scatter plot here just to show the relationships between those who had siblings or family members on board. We have our class by gender bar chart, which shows that those who were male were more likely to be in third class, and most of the females who were on this boat were actually within either first or second class. So the women that were on this boat were more likely to be wealthy. We have our class by age, which shows that those who were in third and second class were more likely to be younger people, and those who were in first and second class range were more likely to be with older, tend to be the older people. Inside our embarkation by class bar chart, which shows that a lot of the people who were in third class come from Southampton, the Southampton area, and we have our box plot for the age by survival, which kind of shows that there wasn't really a relation, like whether or not people survived or died didn't really have to do with their age because they're pretty consistent on both sides. We have our fare by survival violin plot, which basically shows that most people who paid less for their ticket had died. Many people, basically, if you paid significantly less than the rich people for your ticket, you were more likely to die in this wreckage. And then lastly, we have, or in this group here, we have our age density by survival, KDE diagram, and it kind of just shows there wasn't really a relationship between age and survival. Here we have our correlation matrix, our heat map for all of these variables within our data set. And so the thing that had the most relation that you can see is the age, and the ticket prices kind of had the biggest impact on the outcome of the wreckage, which is unfortunate. Basically, your socioeconomic status is what determines whether or not you would have survived or whether or not you would have died. And then lastly, we have our scatter plot with our scatter plot with the hue of whether or not they survived or died, with our the number of parent children, the sibling spouses, the ticket prices, and the age included in here. And so here we're going to evaluate how we can improve the charts I had just shown you. And so what we could do is we could make it simpler and clearer, so the large number of subplots kind of crammed into one thing can make it hard to focus on individual insights. So it's probably better to break them up into fewer theme-based figures, which would make each visualization easier to understand. We can also use a consistent colors across different plots, because it can be confusing if we're using, or it can be confusing if we use different plots. So it's probably best to have like a uniform color scheme throughout the visualizations, and it can make the overall presentation a lot more cohesive and easier to follow. And so what I did was I implemented that through the code. And so the first thing I did was add color palettes, so that we have consistent color theme throughout all the plots. And then I split these subplots into different groups. And so our first one is for the survival analysis group. Our second group is for the fare, or the ticket price, and the age distribution. Our third group is for class and embarkation analysis. And then our final group is for the rest of the plots. And so here we can just showcase really quickly. We have the same color scheme throughout all the plots, and you can see they're all organized a lot better. Our first group being the survival analysis, our fare and age distribution, our embarkation and class analysis, and then the rest of the plots organized and look a lot nicer with their new color scheme. And so lastly, we're going to talk about the report that communicates data insights to a specific audience. And so this Titanic data set reveals important information about passenger demographics, ticket fares, or how much their tickets were, and their survival rates. And this report uses visualizations that help explain how factors like class, gender, age, and ticket prices impacted survival during this disaster. And so the analysis shows that the passengers in higher classes had a much better chance of surviving, with first class passengers having a better chance of survival, and third class passengers faced the most danger. And this is highlighting the socioeconomic inequalities on the Titanic. Gender also played a major role, with women being more likely to survive than men, especially in the third class passengers. And this aligns with the women and children go first policy that was implemented during the evacuation process. We also found out that age influenced survival too, but this is a little bit more complex because only children under the age of 10 and young adults were more likely to survive, like those within the 20 and 30 age range. And then the older you were, the more likely you were going to die in this wreckage. And so most passengers were young adults, particularly in 25 to 30 age range. And this kind of shows how age is impacted by your survival. We also found out that passengers who paid higher tickets or more expensive tickets were more likely to survive. And this supports the idea that wealthier first class passengers had better outcomes. And the fare distribution was skewed, with most paying less than 100 units, but a wealthier group, like in first class, paid significantly more, and this emphasizes the role of socioeconomic status in survival. So just to wrap everything up, the data shows the strong links between class, fare, and survival, with socioeconomic status playing a huge role. Age also mattered, but not as much as class or ticket prices. And this report highlights how data visualization can uncover important stories within a dataset, and it makes it a valuable tool for understanding historical events like this Titanic disaster. Thank you.